Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to the Adams Brothers podcast. We are here this evening with Mr. Kyle K.C. Gibson. He is also a pastor that's very familiar at our church. He comes by and he delivers a powerful message at our church. And Mr. Gibson is going to be running for governor here in the beautiful state of Florida, and he'll be on the ticket with Carmen Jackie Jimenez. Mr. Kyle Casey Gibson, welcome to the Adams Brothers podcast.
Well, thank you, my brothers. Thank you so much for this opportunity. It's a pleasure to have the opportunity for any media of the people of the media to allow candidates to come forth, and I appreciate that you're not just one-sided. We're just allowing one particular party, one particular person, but you are open to allowing people from different parties, different political backgrounds to be able to come forth. So that I am deeply appreciative of, my brothers.
And you're absolutely welcome. We talk to everybody. We talk to Democrats. We talk to Republicans. We talk to independents like yourself when we just want to get your thoughts and give the people a little bit of insight on who you are and what are your goals if elected to the governor of the great state of Florida. So why don't you just go ahead and tell us a little bit about you, where you grew up at, your education, your background, and kind of what led you up to wanting to run for governor, get into politics.
Well, what I want to clear up that being on the ticket, this particular race, I'm on a ticket as the lieutenant governor.
Lieutenant governor, I'm sorry.
And that's all right. I'll clear that up a little later, too, to show how it came to that point. But when you earlier heard during the earlier part of, I think, last year, when I came to the church, it was governor. But I'm a lifelong Floridian. I was born in Tallahassee, grew up in Tallahassee, Florida. And while in Tallahassee, I'm a 69 baby. So the 70s was when I grew up in school. During that time, civics was actively taught throughout the school system in the state of Florida. And in Tallahassee, the school I attended, Hartsfield Elementary, we were very active in civics. And from where our school was located, you could see the new Capitol being built. So it was this tall structure that was there that was just mesmerizing to young kids, seeing this big old tall building and not have to be in New York to see a tall building. And about the age of 8 years old, 78, the new Capitol building was built. And my class had a chance to take a tour of the new Capitol building. At that time, Governor Ruben Askew was the sitting governor. And our class had the pleasure of sitting with him and having about a 5 to 10 minute chat with him. And as he went around the room, he asked all the kids what they wanted to do when they grew up. Well, this 8-year-old kid told Governor Ruben Askew that I one day wanted to be governor of Florida. Of course, you're an 8-year-old kid say that. You don't think much of it. You're like, yeah, okay, you want to be a fireman, you want to be this, you want to be a cowboy. But, he told me the little speech, hey, do good, stay out of trouble, all the good things there. But being a Cub Scout, Boy Scout, I really, really, really took an active role in enjoying civics. And so I really meant that I one day wanted to be governor of Florida. So, I was class president in elementary school, middle school, college, all those things there, major political science at Florida Atlantic University, all those things that continue to be there. So, 8 years old, you're kind of somewhat, little kid, nobody takes you serious. But by high school, teachers and friends of mine kind of knew, because that was my thing. I one day want to be governor of Florida. So, I majored political science, got a minor in history, came back and got my master's of divinity when I answered my call. But my career path took me a few other areas there. I had the pleasure of serving in the Marine Corps, had the pleasure of being a deputy with the Broward County Sheriff's Department and teaching with the Broward County and Indian River School Districts as an educator. Third generation educator. Both my parents were teachers. My great aunts and my fraternal grandmother were also educators. So that was just something that came into the family that also ties into my reason for running and things I want to do there. So in July of 2010, I physically filed my paperwork to run for governor the first time. I filed the same day that Rick Scott was being inaugurated. I was still pastoring in Tallahassee at that time, at Anderson Chapel African Methodist Episcopal Church. And what they do in Tallahassee, every time a new governor is being sworn in, the local pastors have a prayer breakfast for that new governor. Well, I happened to be one of the ones sitting there, and Ruben Askew was still living. Go back for a minute. When I worked on my master's, I took a class with Ruben Askew also at Florida Atlantic University. That was our second time seeing each other from the time I was 8 years old. Ruben Askew and I, he remembered the story about the little kid that one day wanted to become governor. So we kind of shared that. And then another maybe 10 years or so after that, I filed to run. We talked and he said, "Hey, Kyle, I really hope you push this, man. You've been pushing this for a long time." He said, "No matter what you do, don't give up." And he shared with me when he was governor or ran for governor, he was virtually unknown. And they tried to talk him out of running for it. But he held his ground. He ended up winning the Democratic primary and ended up being the first governor since Reconstruction to serve 2 terms. So that's where we were. So 2009, 2010, I filed the run. I qualified for the 2014 race. Right after qualifying, I had some tragedy to come up. My youngest brother, baby brother Christopher, was killed in a car crash.
Oh, sorry to hear that.
And right after Christopher died in his car crash, both my mother and wife were diagnosed with cancer. And while I was going back and forth at Tallahassee to Fort Lauderdale, trying to check on both of them, on my trip back from Tallahassee, my dad had a stroke. And so that was just a little bit too much for the 14 race. So I ended up withdrawing after qualifying. But I filed for that race before the November election to let everybody know that, hey, I'll be back in 2018. So I came back in 2018. There were 8 candidates that ran for governor in the 2018, well, that made it to the primary. I made it to the general election in the 2018 race. I placed 4th overall, but out of the 5 independents who also ran, I received over 10,000 votes more than the next person. So the same thing, right after the 2018 race, I filed to run again for the 2022 race. Now, what happened this go around, I qualified after qualifying for governor, but the lieutenant governor choice that I had the last time is a state worker. A state worker has to get permission from their supervisors in order to run for any kind of public office. It's not, they tell them they can't run, but it's a little process they go through. They tell them, you can't campaign during state time, lot of. Well, I can't say that it was poor influence from the governor's office, but I'm very sure that it was information from the, because they did not give me or would not give this young lady her information. So she could not file. So that meant that after qualifying, had I not picked the lieutenant governor by a certain date, then my name would have been removed from the ballot, which I think the governor's office or whoever was at a point there. So we had to make another choice. Carmen was also in the same situation with her lieutenant governor choice. The Republican Party had changed, the Republican administration had changed the rules with running for office or voting in primaries, where you had to be a member of that party for a year before you can either run for office or vote in a primary. The selection she had was like a few months shy, or maybe just under a month shy of a whole year. So both of us were the only NPAs that were in the race, and we were both in a position of not being able to have an NPA to represent the NPAs in the state. So we came together, we talked about it. She was going to come with me since I ran last time, but I thought about it and I said, well, there's only going to be three males that were running for governor, with lieutenant governors that were females. I think two of the choices, the Democrat, Republican had female choices. So she would have been the only female on the choice of running for governor. With this race this year, with the issues of abortion, there are a lot of females that are Republican that are going to be Democrat in this race because of that hot topic issue. So we decided that I would, myself, because it was more important that an independent person ran and won than just being. So I decided to come and withdraw from the governor's race and file with her as her lieutenant governor choice. And we thought that would made a better opportunity to offer an alternative choice to those that had not made up their mind if they're going to vote straight Democrat or state Republican. And so we've been coming together since that time. And we think that it's going to offer a wonderful opportunity to make a choice there, because there's still a lot of people who are unfamiliar or undecided on who they want to vote for, because both of these candidates are primarily the same as far as their record goes. The Democratic nominee, when he was the Republican governor, has voted the same way that the current governors vote on issues right down the line when he was in the office. And so you ask yourself, is a person really going to make a lot of changes differently from the way they've been voting for a long time? You know, voters have to make that choice, but you have to know the history of a person and realize that people typically don't make a lot of changes from the way they have been, but they'll make changes in order to gain the political office to run forth. So that brings us here to the 2022 election. And we're hoping that this makes a tremendous difference, and the people of Florida know that there is a choice, because so many people think that there's only two people running for governor, you know, the Democratic nominee and the Republican nominee. And they don't know that there's actually two other candidates, viable candidates, that are also running. And so what I appreciate about what you're doing is, I'm sure if all candidates had opportunity to reach out, you'd give them this same opportunity, versus some media don't do that. If they're pro-Republican, pro-Democrat, that's who they push, and they close the doors and allowing other candidates to come forth. But I believe when the people know all their candidates that are running, it gives them an educated guess to make a choice. I would always say to myself, I would love to have an 80% or higher turnout and lose an election versus win an election and only 30% turnout, because you have 70% that weren't there. That means that the people really did not vote in that election. And we really need to do better with our voter turnout and understanding all the different nuances of politics, you know, from Democrat, Republican, Independent, and begin voting for the person versus the party.
Right. Right. Well, you certainly have a very, very impressive background. Just listening to you talk and everything, and I hear you preach at church, but I didn't know that, you know, your background was that extensive. And let me just say thank you for your service to the our country, from joining the Marine Corps, and thank you for your service when you worked for the Broward County Sheriff's Office as well.
Thank you.
And you raised some interesting points when you said about the Republican, the Democratic candidate that's on the ticket. He used to be a Republican.
Correct.
And my mother always say a leopard doesn't never change their spot. So whenever you see somebody that's from one party, whether they're a Republican to Democrat or Democrat to Republican, you have to be, you know, very careful of these candidates who are like a wolf in sheep clothing here, as I would put it.
You have to. Now, I will say, I have switched my when I became 18 years old, I registered as a Democrat because that's what my mother, my father, my stepmother, my great aunties, everybody in my family was a Democrat. So that's all I knew. You know, when the conventions were only on, you know, there was only 3 channels when I grew up: ABC, CBS, and NBC. So every 4 years, you're going to watch the conventions. Now, the Republican conventions never got played in our household. We watched something else. But every time the Democratic convention came on, you were sitting right there in the TV watching all that. So, you know, you were influenced by your parents watching this. But, you know, being a political science major in school and a history major, the thing that made me change from Democrat to eventually become a Republican early in my college career was the historical aspect. I'm a Reconstruction history person. During the period of Reconstruction, which was probably the most phenomenal period of history of African-American political history, was all those individuals were Republicans. You know, your Hiram Rebels, who was your first U.S. senator, who also was a presiding elder in the African Methodist Episcopal Church. You know, they were AME and they were Republican. You know, Republican was the party of Lincoln. That was their number one issue, to turn away from slavery. And so the Republicans at that time had a different mentality. So the former slaves that became free, they became Republican, you know, extensively. So the Republican Party was known as the party of supporting minorities, doing those things there. And that happened until just after Reconstruction. And you had one of the elections there, Rutherford B. Hayes was elected president, but nobody got the majority of the votes. So it went to the House of Representatives. They had to vote for the 2 choices. So
compromise.
The great compromise, exactly. And what the compromise basically was, if we elect you, you promise to remove all the federal troops that were in the South because blacks were being lynched, they were being attacked, they were being killed. So the federal troops were in New Orleans, in your South Carolinas, in your Tallahassees, in your Gainesvilles. They were there to protect blacks so they could vote. And the vote was, you would immediately pull those troops out. When that happened, the Democratic Party in the South became all powerful, and they took over elections in the South, and eventually blacks were not even able to vote, and the Democrats began to take control here in Florida. Until this year, from Reconstruction to this year, Republicans have been in the minority in the state of Florida all these years, all this time. This year, 22, they finally came and overcame, and now they have a majority. But you have to look at what's happened over the last 20 years. We have not had a governor in 20 years, but we've had all Republicans elected. Now, how do you elect if people are voting straight down the party line? This is the question. If everybody Democrat is voting Democrat, everybody Republican voting Republican, how are you electing people when you have more Democrats in every election from 1994, when Jeb Bush lost the election to Lawton Childs during his last term there, until now? You've had more Democrats registered in the state of Florida and voting. So you would think that the Democrats would be winning all those races. But what has happened is that you have a certain segment of the Democratic Party that they vote for certain people within the party. But when it comes to your Doug Jamesons, when it comes to your Andrew Gillums, when it comes to your Thaddeus Hamiltons, who are all statewide candidates that have run, they have not gotten the same votes that others in the party have gotten. Last election, Nikki Fried received more votes than Gillum received. Had Gillum received the number of votes that Nikki received, then Gillum would have very likely won the Democratic nominee, because just on pure numbers. But there's a certain segment of Democrats that vote one way for certain candidates, and we as African Americans haven't figured that out yet. We are blindly loyal to the Democratic Party.
Yes,
and
we are.
As an independent, I say to people, my goal as an independent is not to get people to change from Democrat, not people to change from Republican, but to be more conscious. I, as a Democrat, realized there were some Democrats that I couldn't vote for because of their policies. As a Republican, there were Republicans that I could not vote for. I oftentimes crossed party lines to vote for other people. So I eventually decided to become independent, or NPA, no party affiliated, that I could just vote for the person that I choose to. I think that if the African-American voters, even though we don't have the majority, but if we came together with the percentage that we have there and decided in every election from local to national level that this is who we're going to vote for. We're going to vote for this candidate over here. We're going to vote for this candidate over here. Both political parties will become so interested in our vote because they had realized that we are electing both people from both parties. But right now, the Republican Party barely even campaigns with us because they know you're not going to vote for us. The Democratic Party basically says, I know you're not going to cross the line to vote for somebody else. So they give us a little bit of things there. And you look at every community across the United States, across Florida, primarily African-American community. You can't name an African-American community you look at that doesn't look like a ghetto, that doesn't look like a crime-ridden area. And so you have all of these African-American elected officials, your city commissioners, your county commissioners, your house member, your school board, in these areas that look like you and I, but the neighborhoods are not prosperous like other neighborhoods. And that's what's more important, not the color of my skin, not the party that I belong to, but being able to affect change in your community while you're serving. So when you leave office, your community looks like something that you're proud of versus you being the only one that benefits from leaving, when you decide to either retire or run for higher office.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
No doubt.
Well, that's you laid it out really well right there. I mean, you just, we really don't come out to vote like we are supposed to. Like you said, there are more registered Democrats in the state of Florida than Republicans. And why do you think that these Republicans they try so hard to disenfranchise the voters in so many
Well,
ways?
let's do that. Let's be real fair. And when I say this, both parties are guilty of doing the same thing. When the Democrats were in control and they began to create districts, they X'd out Republican districts. I think if you make a fair district, let's say in Broward County is a heavily Democratic county. But when you go up US 1 from up around Hillsborough Inlet down to Dania and Hollywood along A1A, that's a majority Republican voting base there. So if you have over 75,000 people that are there, that I think is fair to create a district that goes north and south. But when the Democrats are in office, they made East and West districts. So you would have a small section of Republicans and then heavy Democrat voters. So the Democrats, when they were in control, they constantly cut out Republicans. So Republicans just said, hey, it's been so long, it's get back time. We're in control. We control the House. We control the Senate. We control the number of delegates in the Congress, and we control the governor's mansion. And those are the people that make that change you're doing every 10 years and reapportionment. So they put in their policies that's going to be effective to them. One way to really change that is if there was an independent governor in the office during this 10-year period, no party could just run down and say, we're going to ram this down, because it all comes down to who's signing that bill. So if there's a bill as governor that I look at and it's not a bilateral bill, if it's a heavy partisan bill, whether it's Democrat, Republican, and it's not a fair bill to affect change for everybody, I'll veto it. But when you have an opposite person in there, you can affect that change. But when you have your own in there and you control both houses, it's very easy to run. And then for a portion, the Republicans were in the majority, so they had a super majority. So they didn't even, the Democrats didn't even have veto power. So once they passed it through committee, it was like you can argue and scream all you want to. We already got the votes here, and we're going to run it down. And then to make matters worse, we're going to change up the district and the next time. So now you're not going to have as many people in there, and we're going to increase our numbers. And both sides do that. And I think when you see that over and over and over, people get fed up with politics and they figure it doesn't make a difference. Right. And that's the part of the game. They do things to discourage you so many times that you just decide, man, I'm not going to vote. And if I can get a small percentage of African Americans not to vote, then Republicans are able to win seats because they know the Democrats aren't able to. So it's a strategic a plan that's put in action. It is very well orchestrated, but we don't play the game the same way. We play the game, we're going to come in and be loyal, and Democrats have been very loyal to the Democratic Party. But time and time again, I mentioned the name Doug Jamerson. Doug Jamerson, 1994, was a member of the Florida House of Representatives. He was the first Black elected from Pinellas County. He was big in education, real super there. Well, Lawton Childs knew he had his hands full with Jeb Bush. He knew that even though he was very popular, that Jeb Bush was going to come with his daddy's money. The Republican will put money behind him. And so Lawton Childs had a difficult race. Betty Castor, who is the Secretary of Education, she left the department of being Secretary of State to become president of University of South Florida, which left the position open. At that time, the education commissioner was an elected cabinet position. Lawton Childs appointed Doug Jamerson. That was the first time since Reconstruction or since the 70s that a Black had been in a state seat as a cabinet member. So the purpose of doing that was when Doug Jamerson got ready to run statewide, is that African Americans would come out and vote along the Democratic ticket to ensure that Democrats won. However, Jamerson didn't win. Jamerson didn't get the same votes that Lawton Childs got. Lawton Childs won a squeaker against Jeb Bush. But the cabinet position and the Secretary of State that year all fell. Why? because the Democrats that voted for Lawton Childs that were from the Panhandle did not come back and also vote for Doug Jameson. They voted for Frank Brogan, who was the superintendent of schools of Martin County. And at that time, Martin County was even, less populated than it is now. And of course, he became lieutenant governor and all those good things there. But they've done that all the time. Even here in Broward, after you remember the name Thaddeus Hamilton?
I remember that name, but his face doesn't register right now. I have to Google him and look him up.
Thaddeus Hamilton was a candidate for agriculture commissioner here in Broward County from Broward. He's AME. He's out of Mount Hermon AME Church. He won the Democratic nomination. You know how you get these cards that say vote Democrat and the Democrats give it out to everybody and it has everybody's name there? When Charlie ran in 2014, he was in that race there. They didn't even put the brother's name on the statewide stuff in the little picture. Do you know that would have done because most African Americans, or most voters, they don't know who's on there. But if they see a picture and they say, hey, it's a brother, most will go right down the line and vote, especially if he was a Democrat. They would give him that automatic. They didn't even put his name on the information. So people just didn't vote for agriculture commissioner. I'm talking about over like 80,000 people. There was an 80,000 vote difference between agriculture commissioner and the governor's race. That had his name been there, I'm not saying he would have won, but he certainly would have done probably much better. And those are things, they constantly do those things, and we keep going for it. We keep going for it. And I just think the time has come that we have to make a difference. People ask me, why you keep running as an independent and you don't win? The Republican Party has continued to run since Reconstruction. Even though they knew they weren't going to win, they ran somebody every year. In the 1960s, Claude Kirk was, when he was picked to run for the nominee, that was like the end of the road for a Republican candidate. Hey, we want you to be the nominee for governor. Dang. Because it was all over because you weren't going to win the primary. Well, that year, the Democratic primary had a split because of segregation, integration. So Ferris Bryant, who was the sitting Democratic governor, lost the Democratic nominee in the primary. So because he lost that race, he supported Claude Kirk. So in the 60s, the Republicans that were very much in the minority, they won that seat. And every year they have run. And so independents have to do the same thing. It might not happen during my lifetime, but the numbers between Democrats, Republicans, and independents are so close. There's 5 million Democrats, 5 million plus Republicans, and there's close to 4 million NPAs, close to 4 million. And in 12 counties, NPAs are the second majority in registration, meaning Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach is Democrat, NPA, then Republican. On the West Coast, in Collier, Charlotte, and Lee County, it's Republican, NPA, and Democrat. So right across party lines, you see people are gradually voting, changing their party, and registering the first time as NPAs because people are really getting tired of both parties. And so, you keep hitting it. Every time I run, I get more and more people like yourself that give me the opportunity. And I think what this does is gives me, even if I don't get a vote from a person, it gives me that look to say, I'm going to decide between Gibson and this other person here. I might not get the vote, but I prefer to look over versus I'm only going to vote for somebody else because I didn't know anything about you. Right. And I feel that if I have this opportunity like here more and more time, it'll give me a better opportunity to be able to present myself to the people, to make a choice to say, hey, maybe we need to do something new.
Well, we're going to put you out there on our channel, and we want people to familiarize themselves with you and your background and everything. And you just touched on a whole lot of things just now. Right. And I'm going to ask you one question. I'm going to let my brother come in. And you talked about abortion right now, and it started at the Supreme Court. They did what they did, and it just took off around the country. And Florida and the governor now, DeSantis, he just followed suit, and there's just it's mind boggling to me how you could pass a law and then virtually a woman has no say so.
No
What
say so.
you can do, what she can do with her own body. And I just wanted to ask you, what are your thoughts on abortion? These current abortion laws in Florida or around the country?
There, my personal philosophy, my personal viewpoint, I'm a pro-life person. My personal viewpoint, I'm pro-life. I'm not in favor of abortion as my personal, political, social, whatever viewpoint, from a religious point of view, all those things. However, I believe that that person, the female, has a right to make that decision. That's my choice. My choice is that my viewpoint is I'm not in favor. Would I go and blow up a bomb or blow up a abortion building? Would I go fight someone and do all those things there? No, because a person has their right to feel differently for whatever reason.
That's
You
right.
know, and there are many reasons that you have to look at why a woman may not have a child. Take for instance, you have a female that's decided she wanted to be a nun, so she took a vow of chastity, and that was her choice there. And then some guy, for whatever reason, decides to rape her, so now she's pregnant. So now she has two things: her chastity has been broken, and she has a child. And you're telling her now you got to go forth and still raise this child.
Right.
There are some other things, with adoption, there's some other options. I think if those options are made available, some people may make the decision not to, other than I just want to do this. But to tell a person that you don't even have a say so, because those same people that are normally aggressively pro-life, you turn around for the death penalty, are the people that will put a person in the chair in a minute. And so when you look at the both ends of spectrums there, a life is a life.
Right.
One life is unknown, one life is known. I'm not in favor for the death penalty. I've told people that as the governor, there will be no death sentences or death penalties or warrants signed during my administration. I was asked about the current situation with the young man here in Parkland, and I said I would not if he had gotten the chair and I was elected. It wouldn't be he wouldn't be executed under my watch, because we know this as being African American, that the laws and the courts look one way, and it appears that a person is guilty, but far too many times there's been one smidge of evidence that was either withdrawn, held back, or whatever, didn't have enough money for a lawyer, and you find out years later they didn't do it. What do you do if you've executed a person and you find out 2 years after you executed them that they didn't do it? There's
It's too
nothing to
late.
do.
It's too
But if
late.
the person is incarcerated, though you can't give them that time back, there's some things you can do. You can stand up on behalf of the state of Florida, on behalf of the state of Illinois, whatever. We apologize, so and so. There's some compensation you give back. There's some other things you do to help them get that time. But if you take a person's life, you don't get that. And then my pastoral piece comes in there. Everybody has a chance to make a change in their life and everything. And I just feel that, the giving and taking of a life is in the hands of one person. And that's my savior. But because the Constitution and the U.S. Constitution says, or not the Constitution, but the laws of the land said abortion has been legal for the years, then, when in Rome, do as the Romans, a person has that choice. But to change that and say, well, now you don't have a choice, because now where are you going to stop at that point there? What else are you going to change? Are you going to start changing like they're doing the voting laws? Are you going to start changing, the rights that we have as African Americans, that that right is not just given to us. That right had to be voted upon every so many years, whether or not we're going to get those rights restored again. And so guess what happens if you get the wrong people that are behind 45 and other people that feel that way, that decide, we're not going to do this anymore. We're not going to give these rights. So we're going to change and reverse the civil rights law of 65, and other times. And I can see that happening with this group of people just because of some of the rhetoric and things they've said since, November, January 6th. That was a prime example of, in my time, I've never seen that kind of stuff happen. But I know my mother's generation and before, they were looking at that like, hey, I've seen this before. And like, we're going back in time, and they're doing everything across the board, taking away the right to vote, making it difficult for a felon, a person that gets in trouble, to get your right to vote back. All these things that are small nuances that take away votes, stealing votes, and they've been doing that for years and years and years. And so I just think that those are the things that they're important to you. that you need to vote. If you feel that abortion, and a lot of Republican females are saying they're not voting for Republican candidates, they're not changing their party, but they're not voting Republican for certain races for any any Republican candidate that says that they're real stronghold, overdue, gung ho for abortion. They're not voting for them, and I think they're going to take a hit for that, for being so strong headed with that issue.
Why?
Yes, Mr. Gibson. Given the likelihood that you would be working, given the likelihood that your administration would be working with a legislature with the Republicans are in control. As an independent, how would you and the governor implement your agenda?
Well, the agenda would be very simple. Now, the Republican Party and the Democratic Party before, basically because they had a majority, didn't even include in subcommittees the other side because they had the votes. But as the person that has to sign the bill, now you don't have a choice. And so what we've both talked about and both agree on is that every bill that comes through there, if it looks like when it's going through committee that it doesn't have bipartisanship, you just put a note down. You need to make some adjustment to that board. You need to add some more people to that board. You need to make some adjustments there so you have an input for more people. You need to have some people of color involved in the economic impact, because if you don't have people of color, they're not looking out for areas like Sistrop. They're not looking out for areas like Collier City. They're not looking out for those kind of cities there. So you need to have input for economic impact from all parts. And if you force that in the middle part and you just say simply, you're going to waste your time if you don't make those changes, because I'm telling you right now, if I don't see those changes in there beforehand, my pen is already in my hand and I'm going to veto the bill, period. When a person knows that in the beginning, it forces them now to say, dang, we got to do something different. And so now having an independent in that position, you force the dominant party, even though they still have the numbers, but you're in that controlling number there as the gatekeeper to force them to make some more compromises. And politics is all about compromise. You have to go back and forth. But when you just decide it's my way or the highway, it doesn't go well.
All right. And also, how would your administration handle the rising cost of homeowners insurance in the state of Florida, which has been rising astronomical, especially citizens insurance? Citizens insurance, I know they're going through a revamp right now as far as roofs. How would your administration handle the insurance?
That there is a challenging issue because there's so many other factors, not just that they're raising the insurance or they're raising the building. The materials are cost of materials are rising. And so from a business side, if I'm a builder and I've been building a house for $100,000, but my supplies only cost me $5,000, just using a simple math there. And for years, my supplies only cost me $5,000. Now I can hire so many people, so everybody eats. There's a rotating bill going there. But then if I pop up this year and out of nowhere, now my supplies are costing me $25,000. Well, yeah, you can probably still sell the house for the same amount, but are you going to have the same number of people? So then you get a problem with, if I don't have the same number of people, it's going to take longer. Then you get that supply and demand. And so the short of that, that's still a challenge. That's a very, it needs to be some working with everybody. And because we have a free enterprise system, you really can't put limits because you have two people. Maybe if there was some other business that went into manufacturing that had more competition there, but in the manufacturers, you don't have the competition. Any area you have, when you don't have competition, you have that opportunity where one person can set the prices at what they want to set. And so you have to collectively find ways to change that and, just offer some other incentives, some other incentive to say, hey, there's a tax increase or tax decrease that you may get if you lower a different amount here, because what you're doing is going to provide jobs for others. And so in those areas, I have no problem giving a huge business like a Home Depot, I'm just using an example there, or IBM when they were in the Delray area, giving them a tax incentive for being able to maybe send those supplies out lower, because now if they're saving on their taxes, then they can afford to not charge as much for those supplies. And then those prices, I think, will be passed on, and those savings will be passed on to people like you and I. But if it doesn't, what's going to happen, you're going to have a lot of people leaving the state of Florida. And if we have too many people to leave, with us being a non-sales tax state, you're going to start growing into some other issues there. If even the consideration of raising sales tax in the state of Florida is like political suicide for anybody. But the reality of it is, if things don't change, then that's going to be an option that may have to be on the table that nobody wants. And so again, it comes down to negotiation, talking to, and you may not want to cut taxes for a business, but you may have to say, all right, we're going to give you this tax increase, but you have to guarantee us that your manufacturing price is going to be lower, so those prices, continue to go down. And then we can't control hurricanes and storms. The West Coast right now, we've had it with Andrew. You know how insurance rolls. Insurance, you pay insurance. They ain't expecting you to wreck your car. They're not expecting your house to get broken into. They're not expecting you to get sick. They're not expecting you to lose your home. And if one or two people lose a home in a fire, we got reserves for that. But now you have whole communities losing multi-million-dollar homes. They got to now recruit that. And so it gets to be that point where the selfishness comes in there. Are you really in the insurance business to help people? Are you in the insurance business because it's a profitable endeavor, because you're paying into it, but you don't have any damages? All those are so many factors that come into why those prices are going up, because now they're trying to recoup. Over there in Fort Myers area, Collier County, it's going to be a whole big thing for them to regroup. But we know it can be done. Look at Florida City and Andrew. In 92, it's much different. Every time I go down to the Keys to dive and I see that area, I almost can't believe I'm looking at the same place.
Yeah.
We'll come back.
And also, you being in law enforcement, how do you feel about or would you make any changes to Governor DeSantis and the legislature's anti-riot bill? And also, another question. How would your administration handle, because during a lot of social justice protests and unrest, and nationally, a lot is being asked about qualified immunity. As being former law enforcement, how would you handle qualified immunity and the anti-riot protest bill?
Again, because that was passed through legislature, so you're dealing with having to not just myself change that law, electing individuals that say, hey, this is the sole purpose. We need to get people in there that's going to help reverse this law. Because the law was made to be like it was in the 60s and 70s. Do whatever you want to, we're going to protect you. But because of those police brutalities, that's why some of those laws have been changed. So now, you give the credit to a police officer to give some leeway, but when they step over the line. Rodney King, when you watch that, there is nothing that you can look at in any standard practice to say that he was justified in what they did to him. Do you have to be a little bit more aggressive to get a person cuffed and down? Sometimes it gets a little challenging, but once they're in control and once they're cuffed, it's over. And I think that, law enforcement officers have always been a racially motivated thing with officers in there. Officers have continued to mistreat people of color, minorities, always done that. And in other communities, they don't do the same thing. You wouldn't see community, officers in Parkland pulling officers over like they do on the Sister corridor. It's a whole different attitude there. But when you look at the number of people who shoot officers, the numbers are not we shooting officers. There's other people shooting officers more. So there's too many things that go in there, but I certainly would do everything I can to reverse that, even if it meant doing a temporary suspension by executive order, because it's unfair. You have a right to protest. You have a right to speak your mind. You have a right to do that within means. January 6th was not a peaceful protest. I still to this day don't see how people weren't killed. Had that been done at the Million Man March, it would have been they would still be wiping blood up now had they done anything remotely to that.
Yes,
And I can't understand how when they broke through those doors, and had weapons and had those items in there, and knowing that some are armed, I still to this day can't see that how only 1 or 2 people were shot that day.
Well, they were empowered by number 45. He was the fuel to the fire.
Exactly. And he could let that in there. And so those are the kind of things that people need to just always be woken up to see that the same thing is still occurring right now. You can blindly see that what DeSantis did, it bought into that mentality of people that want to see that kind of thing come back again. They've been quiet for a while. They couldn't do anything with Obama because Obama came through there. But, you have a group of people that don't want to see an Obama-type person ever elected again. So they do things, and the laws have always been changed in the legislative branch, because once you make a law, then you can justify what you're doing there. We as voters need to begin to understand that process so we can know that, hey, you may not need to vote for this person this go around because of that, and go forth. And, this governor, he has every intent to run in 2024. He's not doing 4 years. He doesn't intend to. And I don't have a problem with the person having aspiration to move on. But say this to the people: I intend to run for president, but I still want to serve in your governor. I actually ran in 2020 for a city commission seat in Fort Lauderdale, even though I had filed to run for governor in 2022. And I was asked on the stage, they said, well, I understand that you're also running for governor. I am. Well, are you going to stop running for the governor's race if you win? No. Well, what are you going to do? If I'm elected to this city commission seat, I'll be giving you 2 years. And in 2 years, I'll be resigning and go forth. Well, why are you running for only 2 years? Because everybody is saying this guy is so terrible and they want him out of office, but nobody is stepping forward to do anything. So at least I can get him out for 2 years. Somebody else can find out they can run there, and then the governor can reappoint someone. People can appreciate that integrity.
Right.
But mark my word and hear this here. If the Democratic nominee wins this race, he is also going to do the same thing, because this has always been his aspiration. Charlie has always wanted to be president. That's his just like me wanting to be governor, that's his aspiration. And he understands at this moment, the Democratic Party has nobody from the national portion that is ready right now, have stepped up to run. And Charlie knows that. He's a very astute, very wise politician. And he knows that Biden is not going to run in 2024, regardless of what he says. That he knows that. He knows that Harris, as much as I love her, is not going to be able to be successful because of who she attached to, right. Not because of her individually. And the other portion is that the country is not ready for, first of all, and I carefully say this, but the country is not ready for a female president. Hillary would have been in if they're ready for that. More or less, an African-American female was running. So Charlie knows that there's nobody out there now. So if he can get back into the governor's mansion, because the governor's mansion, there have been more presidents that have been governors than any other office. It's been the most presidents have been governors, U.S. senators, and secretaries of state. Hillary Clinton was all three of those, even though she wasn't the governor. Her husband was the governor, so she basically was governor in there and everything there. So she had the qualifications, and she didn't get there. And Charlie wants to win this seat. And 2 years from now, if he wins this nomination or wins this election, you can best believe he's going to position himself, and he still may do it, even if he doesn't win. He still may make a run for it, But I think that if you're going to serve 4 years or 8 years, give the people that whole time, or at least tell the people, hey, I might not be here for these whole 4 years, but I think this is a wonderful opportunity to become president. And most of the time, people will line up and say, hey, go along with it. That part I don't have a problem with. But to say and make it appear that you're not, but you're doing commercials and fundraisers in Utah and Idaho, man, come on. That ain't voters from Idaho and Utah don't come to Florida.
All right. You guys have another question? Real quickly, I have two questions here. What are your thoughts on pay raises for teachers? And to my knowledge, medical marijuana was passed here in the state of Florida. What are your thoughts on medical marijuana and recreational marijuana being passed here in Florida? And would you support that as a governor and a lieutenant governor?
I would. I'm not a drinker. I'm not an alcohol person, but we make a lot of money off the sale of alcohol and taxes. Marijuana is one of those kind of drugs that people don't get high and then go out and start busting people in the head. You know, they kind of lay back, they chill out, they chill. And Colorado and other states have shown the amount of money that they're able to make through the sale of it. Look how many young men and women have been incarcerated for not trafficking any large amounts, but for small amounts of marijuana. You know, I believe putting a person in prison and the state paying $37,000 an inmate for some weed is a complete waste of money. There's a lot better things we can be doing with that money there. And so if we make those changes, if we stop incarcerating people for nonviolent offenses, we begin to save that money. And that's, instead of putting millions of dollars into the Department of Correction, you begin to now not put all that money into the Department of Corrections. And then you have a surplus of money that you can now put into education. Now what happens is, because of the criminal mind that people look at and the conservative viewpoint, it's better to put somebody in prison and jail and lock up this hardened criminal that had some weed.
And speaking of jail, if those that's in jail right now for weed, not medical marijuana, but for marijuana, would you commute their sentence?
See, that's the reason why they're not doing it, because now you got to free all them people that's been in prison. If you are a worker for GEO, you're making, if you're the CEO of GEO, the private prison industry, you get $37,000 an inmate. And if you calculate it right, if you get incarcerated in January, I can give you time served and other stuff and work out that time and get you out of prison by April. But then you have a contract that if you violate, you go back. Well, they already know that if you can't get a job, all the stipulations behind that, they already know you're going back. 60% of people are going back into the system. So guess what? If you go back in before a 12-month period, guess what the prison gets again? Another $37,000. So you've gotten almost, close to $60,000 for 1 year for one person. And if you do it just right, there's sometimes you get them in there 3 times. That money would free up money for education. It would free up the prisons. And I just think that should be done there. You free up those private, spending 20, 25 years for a marijuana charge, or even a trafficking charge, a person trafficking 2 or 3 keys. Okay. You didn't kill anybody. I'm not agreeing with what they did, but the laws are just, they're not fair. That, crack cocaine was different from powder cocaine, all those disparities in laws, but they were created by legislators purposely to incarcerate certain people.
Yes. And once you get incarcerated, that look like us.
You can't vote. And so all those things come into place. So it wasn't just to put them in jail to make money off of them. It was when they came back that now for 20 years or 30 years, they can't even vote. And the average person is not going to fight for 20 years just to vote. They're going to be like, man, I'm not going to waste my time. I'm going to just get me a good job and stay out of trouble. And they're not going to worry about it.
Right. Wow.
But I certainly would work on getting individuals that were in for those, commuting those sentences and, pardon them for that so they can be free to move about freely.
And the pay raises for the school teachers.
Well, if I did not say I would help teachers' salary get there, I could not go home for Christmas or Thanksgiving, because I told you both my parents were teachers. So absolutely. I know they're going to hear this. So for that reason alone, teachers are one of the most vital. They control and educate the governors, presidents. They come through teachers.
Right.
And so most teachers aren't in the position to be millionaires, but you have to be able to give some kind of way of helping them. We have far too many teachers leaving because of simple things. You're making your salary, but you don't have paper in the classroom. You know, that free money may not go towards a salary, but if you could have supplies, most teachers will be happy. I can deal with the $38,000 salary. Just give me some supplies. I'm spending $12,000 a year in supplies. So that's money coming from my salary. If we pay for the supplies, pay for other things, continue to finance programs like music and sports programs. Because if you cut those programs from your Dillards and your Ely, and you cut those in Stranahan's, most of those kids go to college because of their athletic ability, because they don't have enough parents that just have the money to send them to schools. And so these are the things that they're starting to cut. You know, you cut your art programs. You know, you have kids that have other talents that they're not musically or athletically inclined. So you have to offer other alternatives for them there that have been around for years and years in enrichment programs, and they're cutting those programs. They're cutting out inner city schools piece by piece through charter schools, where other schools are now getting those monies. And now your inner city schools are no longer looking like inner city schools, but they're the top managers are making the money. The principals are making high salaries, and you're forcing these tests on people that is not dictating, you know, the knowledge that you know stuff. Everybody learns differently. So unfortunately, it's a systematic way that the dominant party right now has put together for years. And it's just a wake-up call that we need to realize that, you know, a game is being played on us, and we need to open our eyes, because if we continue to sleep, you get to the point when you wake up, there's so much change game there. It's going to take 2 generations to reverse what happened.
Final question, and then we'll wrap it up.
Yes. Would your administration support a full ban on assault rifles here in the state of Florida?
My personal piece, I have mixed emotion with that. I'm a weapons person because of my background. I love, if I could afford certain weapons, if I could afford an AK, I'd buy one, because I just enjoy the playing with them. You know, they're toys. I enjoy scuba diving. Scuba diving is a expensive thing there. For the most part, in most situations, there's a few cases differently. When you have a lot of shootings, mass shootings, they're not always done by people, you know, like I say, in some settings, they're not always done by a person that's legally able to own a weapon. They're done by somebody who's not legally able to own a weapon. And those situations, putting a law in order, there is nothing you can do about that. If a person has decided they're going to do something there, you and I both know that if I needed to get something and I walk around in our neighborhoods and I need a certain weapon, you know, within 1 or 2 days, you know, you got access to it between Palm Beach and Dade County. And I'm a little mixed on completing, because I'm a weapons person. I enjoy those things there. I believe not to put in a ban, but I believe the restrictions from the point of purchasing or getting the right to get a gun is where the restriction need to be put on there. If you have a person that has been Baker acted before, that's something I think needs to be known, okay? Because now you need to kind of, we may need to not allow this person because, you know, there are other issues there. Where they still have access to get a weapon? Yeah, you know, they still have access to get one some kind of way if they're just determined to do something. But to the majority of law-abiding people, and I just think that to do that, how are you going to get them back? You know, when they have that comment over my dead hands, taken from my dead hands, you're going to have a real problem enforcing that, to go to people's houses and say, okay, everybody who owns these, we're going to be coming to your house and knock them down. You know, you're going to have some other problems in there. And so just my thought, that's just my opinion about this. Banning it, I don't think solves the problem. But I do believe closing loopholes where I can go to a gun show, I can buy one from somebody that owns one, and I don't have to report that. You know, those kind of loopholes. Or if you're in Chicago, you go to the next neighboring city or state and you can purchase weapons and then come back. Those are loopholes that need to be more universal. If you do that, that will cut down on some, but I don't think it's going to necessarily cut down on all the homicides there. And so I'm still wavering, the Parkland situation, my heart goes out to that weapon and everything there. Would he have done that if he didn't have that? We never know. That's one of those, very sensitive things there. And unless you're in that situation, lost a loved one, I lost my, I told you my middle brother, my baby brother died in a car crash, but my middle brother, Kish, we lost to a homicide when I was in my last year of seminary. He was murdered. And that didn't necessarily change my idea about, guns, because Kish was killed with a gun. Things happen. I believe a person has a right. I believe it was even if the country knows that people are armed, I think it lessens the responsibility of people being there. There's a commercial or a spoof, and a guy's in Texas and he comes in and he robs a bank. And he walks in, he robs the bank, right? And as soon as he pulls his gun out, the teller, everybody in the bank, the old man, the young man, everybody in the bank, pull guns on him and wait for the police to get there. Problem solved. So when everybody knows that this is an even situation, it changes up. If you take away certain weapons from people that can own them, then just say you have an assault rifle at your house and 5 people decide to come in. Well, if I know I have a legal right to have one and 5 people walk in my house with the same kind of weapons, it evens up the situation than me having a handgun and going pow, pow. It's almost like the Harlem Nights situation, everybody's shooting up and lighting up the situation, and you coming in there.
Arsenio.
Yeah.
Arsenio.
Put that little thing down. Don't shoot it no more. Those kind of situations. But that's, it's a very sensitive thing, fire in Broward County, especially, because we've witnessed that. But I'm still on the fence on that right now. As of right now, a complete ban, because most people are doing well and have those and have a right to do that there. And then, you get into the part about the money. If a person has decided that's the job they want to do and sell weapons, now you're cutting into that person's ability to live. So, you have to, one thing is you have to be open to listen to both sides. And that's one thing I've done about, the weapons. I felt differently at one time, but when I started listening to both sides of this, you hear other stories there, and you really just, when you're open to listen, I think you come to a better decision. And one thing as an independent, I'm open to listening to every legislator, all 120, Democrats and Republicans, versus I'm only going to listen to the ones that are blue, or only to the ones that's red. And if they're not my party, then I'm not listening to them. As an independent governor, everybody will have my ear. And I think once you do that, it's fair.
Okay. So before we wrap it up, just look into the camera real quick, and I give you 2 minutes. Okay. Tell everybody why they should vote for you as Lieutenant Governor and Carmen Jackie Jimenez as governor here in the beautiful state of Florida.
Ladies and gentlemen watching, I ask, when you get ready to vote, if you have not voted yet, I ask you 2 simple questions. Over the last 4 years, are you happy with the way that the governor has operated in the state of Florida? Well, if you're happy with that, then this choice is easy. You vote for that way. If you go back to 2006 to 2010 and look at the state of Florida doing that, you will see that there were very similar characteristics, with the exception of the health crisis we face this year, that both of these men voted the exact same way right down the pipe. So essentially, you have 2 candidates that are running that are one and the same. You have 2 other candidates that are seeking your vote. I happen to be one that's seeking your vote. I always ask people to look at all 4 candidates. Don't just vote down there. Look at all 4 candidates. And when you look there, I believe that the team between Jimenez and Gibson is a team that has the best interest from a social point of view, from an economic look, and a process of fairness. We're never going to get everything we want. But if you're fair with the people, I think people will be more happy there. And I think that it's time to do something new in 2022. And that could be electing someone that has a heart, has a love and compassion for doing the right thing for the state of Florida. And so that would be Jimenez and Gibson.
Yeah, wait, job well done, man. You
Thank you.
really laid it out. We want to thank you for coming by and stopping by the Adams Brothers podcast. We've been talking to Mr. Kyle K.C. Gibson. He's going to be on the November 8th ballot, and he will be on the ballot with Carmen Jackie Jimenez. She's running for the governor, and Mr. Kyle K.C. Gibson, who is also an outstanding pastor. You all have, if you have never heard him preach before, you all have to really, he really delivers a very powerful message, something that you can take home and apply to your life. So, Mr. Gibson, thank you so much again for coming by the Adams Brothers podcast.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Good luck to Jimenez and Gibson on the November 8th ballot, and we hope to see you as governor here in the beautiful state of Florida.
And early voting starts Monday in Broward County, Florida.
Yes, sir. So that's why I'm glad I got this message out, because those that are undecided, this may give those few people an opportunity. So again, for my brothers, from our heart to yours, you'll be surprised how many African-American outlets do not let another African-American, because I'm not Democrat, have an opportunity to speak, but will let a person who has been Republican for all his life have all the ideas. So my brothers, thank you for this opportunity. I don't take it lightly.
You're very welcome. That won't ever happen here. Mr. Gibson, thank you for stopping by the Adams Brothers podcast. Good luck to you in November 8th, and hope to see you back here as Lieutenant Governor and as Governor and Lieutenant Governor here on the Adams Brothers podcast. Thank you so much.
That if there are a lot of people that will have difficulties getting to me, because I remember those that allowed me the opportunity to speak. I can tell you that when the Lord blesses us to get in that seat there, that you won't have to worry about waiting a long line to have me to come back and address your people on your show.
That's what we want to hear.
That's what we want to hear. Thank you very much, Kyle K.C. Gibson. Have a good evening, sir.
God bless you, gentlemen. Thank you.
God bless.
Thank you.